Okay, this is going to be a big one. And this one's really important. This one's going to be about weather. Get ready. Here we go, episode 1. Okay, we're gonna bust this into 2 pieces here. I'm not sure where we'll split it. Weather is a massive topic, but it really affects how you need to approach fishing on any given day. The first part of that is determining the weather that's past, and the second part is determining the weather that's coming. So some of us are blessed to live in areas where there are not massive changes in weather all the time, but there's very few of us. So for the rest of us, we need to know what's going on when we're planning our next fishing trip. Now, weather is a huge topic, and we're going to get into the very basic aspects of how weather affects fishing. The other thing that we need to consider is at the different times of year. We're not going to do that. We are going to talk about what weather does to a body of water. Now, there will be some differences around the world because we all have different weather that we've got to deal with. But there are the things that we're going to outline here, and I'll have to check quickly. The things that we're going to outline here will affect any body of water, particular to guys that are bass fishing. So let's get into it. What we're going to start with first is fronts. Now, we're going to simplify it down. Again, this is something that anybody can do. As long as you listen and understand what I'm saying to you now, it's easy. Don't overcomplicate it. Fronts do certain things. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, that's what they do. It doesn't change. So there's pretty much only 2 kinds of fronts we're going to discuss here. Cold fronts and warm fronts. There's a couple of things we're going to discuss about fronts. Now, when a weather system or a front moves into an area, it does a couple of things. What a front basically is the movement of areas of high pressure and areas of low pressure, and how they move relative to each other. We're not getting into it any further than that. That's where we're going to leave it. And most of the time, whether you're going to have a front moving into your area or not can be determined from doing something as simple as watching a weather report or looking up weather online. Live weather is the best material that you can use for actually determining what the weather's going to do. And what I mean by that is, if you watch someone physically explaining on a map of your area what weather is coming, that's going to help you determine what you need to be thinking about before you're going to go on your fishing trip. It may even stop you from going on a fishing trip because of weather advisories or whatever the case might be. As far as fronts go, the only one we really need to be concerned about is cold fronts. Warm fronts generally, although they may bring specific things in weather, are not going to hurt fishing as much as a cold front does. Now, fronts do a couple of things. Number 1, they bring wind. That can be a good thing or a bad thing. They can bring rain. They can bring snow. All of that affects the decisions that you're going to make when you're going fishing. But you also need to know what has gone before. If you're going fishing on a Saturday and a cold front has come through on a Wednesday, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have great fishing on the Saturday. The fish are still affected by that front. If you're going fishing on a Saturday and the cold front is coming through on a Sunday, you could have the best fishing day of your life because, generally speaking, bass will feed before a front. And this is something, it's almost like witchcraft. The fish know before we know what's going on. It's a fact of life. You're not going to get around it. It is what it is. But generally speaking, this is how we're going to break it down. A couple of days before a front, and let's just say a front for now, hits your area, fish will start to feed heavily. You might have sneaked out on a Wednesday afternoon after work for a quick session, and you find you are absolutely destroying the fish. It's a good indicator that there's a front coming, and I bet you if you go home and look at your live weather, you will see that a front's going to hit either on the Thursday or the Friday. I haven't had it sufficiently explained to me as to why that is the case. The best I can do on that is that they know, the fish know that when that front hits, it will change all the living patterns of the food that they eat, make the food more difficult to get hold of, so they know that they need to feed up now, because for the next couple of days their food may be difficult to come by. And like we discussed in the very first video that we did, what I'm doing here is giving you guidelines. The fish don't care about what I tell you. You could go out there 2 days after a cold front and have the best fishing day of your life. If those fish decide in that half an hour that you catch them that they're going to feed now, they're going to feed now. And nothing I can tell you will make you believe any different. It's just the way it is. So, here we go. Before the cold front hits, the fish will feed. The day that the cold front hits, the fish will continue to feed. The day after the front hits, the fish will continue to feed. After day one, and we call that day one, the day after the front is hit, it becomes increasingly difficult to catch those fish. It is not as obvious in the summertime, because a cold front in the summertime, if you live in a warm part of the world, may take your temperature from 85 Fahrenheit, which you're used to 76 Fahrenheit. Or for my brothers, you may go from 25 degrees to 19 degrees. Not a big deal. But in the cooler times of the year, in the spring, in the fall and going into the winter, or the autumn going into the winter, it can literally shut them down. They will stop. They just will not feed, or it appears that they will not feed. I'm not saying you can't catch them. You can definitely catch them. You just have to approach it differently. The other thing that fronts do is they bring wind. Now, wind can work with you or against you. If you've been out on a Saturday and you found fish in a specific area of the lake and you've put the steel to them and you've had the best day ever, and you go the following weekend and a front has come through and it's walloped your lake, and the prevailing wind from that front has blown into that bank where you clubbed those fish on the previous weekend, and I'm taking my friend out and we are going to cane it today. The weather's perfect. The front went through on the Monday. It's had plenty of time to calm down, and you get to arrive at that area and it is mud, because the wind blowing across the lake into that bank has created wave action and has knocked every piece of soil off that bank for a radius of 6 million miles around your golden fishing spot. It's something you need to be aware of. If you live in near a lake where you don't have a lot of mud and stuff, it's not as a bigger concern, but it will still stir up whatever detritus or junk is on the bottom, and it will discolor the water. It's things you need to think about. Now, if you're out on a day and it's a beautiful day and you start struggling to get bites and you start getting a steady breeze or a wind moving into an area, it has the opposite effect. That can trigger those fish to feed, because it starts clouding up the water, the bait fish start moving, and the bass just start eating. It's all relative. But in this particular situation, we're talking about frontal movements. To give you an example, last year and the year before, I went to visit my brother from another mother in Minnesota. And Minnesota is just one of those crazy areas where you can have periods of stable weather for a couple of weeks on end, and I've had that when I've been to visit him. But last year or the year before, I can't quite remember which one it was, we had a period of 5 to 6 days where fronts were coming through literally every hour to 2 hours. It was the most frustrating thing. We could not decide what to do on the lake that we were on. And eventually we just decided the heck with it. And we went off to a small lake and we just fished it as best we could, and we caught fish. The other thing that happened was, and one of the trips I was there was in November. Excuse me, dry throat. It was about 55, 60 degrees on a Monday morning in November. For my South African brothers, that's not warm enough. And I was playing with a little bit of tackle in the garage, and we decided we weren't going to fish on that day. There was an onshore wind blowing, a strong onshore wind. It was probably 20 to 30 miles an hour, and the temperature started dropping rapidly. And something happened to this warm weather brought up South African boy, which I will not forget for the rest of my life. This hard stuff immediately started forming on the surface of the lake. Didn't understand it. Just went from being water to not water. And I went to bed that night, not loving life. Woke up the next morning, picked up a rod with a Senko tied on, walked out, flipped it off the end of the dock, and it bounced. It's not good. Not good at all. Not for this boy anyway. Overnight, a layer of ice had formed, literally overnight, on the half of the lake, or on the side of the lake which we were staying on. Now, to a lot of you guys that live in America, that's no big deal. You see it every year. To me, it was game changer. I still had 7 to 10 days of my vacation time left, and I wanted to go and fish. Later that afternoon, a wind of probably 20 to 30 miles an hour started blowing, creating waves going across the lake. Not big waves, small waves. And I heard this grating sound. So just a small example of what I'm talking about, of how quickly weather can affect your fishing. Fronts as a whole, for what we do in fishing, are fairly straightforward. So we've discussed it already, but we're going to break it down quickly just so that it's more understandable. A few days before the front, fishing's going to be good. Hopefully that falls on your Saturday or Sunday when you're going to go fishing. Hopefully, not usually the case. The day of the front, still going to be okay, not too bad. Day 1, it starts tapering off. From day 1 to day 4, you're going to have to work for them. Again, I'm not saying you're not going to catch them. You're just going to have to work for them. And as we go along with the chapters, as we've discussed in every video so far, we'll discuss how to target those fish. Everybody can catch them when they're biting. But when they're not biting and you've only got a couple of days or 1 day a week on the water and you need to get them, that's what we're going to talk about. Like we said, this channel is not about tournament fishing. This is about us having fun. So the most important thing is getting the most amount of fun out of that 1 or 2 days on a weekend that most of us fishermen, not me, as I live in Scotland and there are no bass here, but most of us fishermen can get out over the weekend and go and enjoy ourselves catching our favorite little green fish. I hope this explains a little bit about fronts. Don't get bent out of shape about it. Use the basic information that I've given to you about fronts, and you'll be fine. In the next video, we're going to discuss the weather from the aspects of the weather and how they affect a particular lake or the particular lake you fish on around the world. It's universal. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned for part 2 of weather. Guys, there's so much stuff that you can read into weather and all the technical details of it, and I've really tried very hard not to go into it because I am fascinated by weather. I love it. But we're trying to keep it simple, how it pertains to our fishing. We don't want to complicate the whole thing. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about the various aspects of weather and how that might affect a particular body of water. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. We're out.